So Marvel has made, in my opinion, over the last couple months, I would say two like main big decisions. One was bringing Robert Downey Jr. back to the MCU, but this time as Doctor Doom. And the second one was in the Deadpool and Wolverine movie. They brought Deadpool officially into the MCU. And now, when it comes to the Deadpool part of that, Deadpool has been one of the better Marvel IPs for the last 8 or so years at this point, and I personally feel that it's contributed to what has contributed to that success was its detachment from the larger MCU group of Marvel IPs. With that no longer being the case, due to the release of Deadpool and Wolverine, I'm personally concerned about the effects of bringing Deadpool and maybe its own cast into the larger MCU franchise. So, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about it. So when it comes to Deadpool's standalone success, Deadpool's irreverent humor, he breaks the fourth wall. He's obviously super R-rated, very graphic. Um, it's some of the things that set him apart from the rest of the MCU, who maybe touched on some graphic stuff here and there. Of course, you never saw something. We knew RDJ was getting busy. Well, Tony Stark was getting busy, I believe, in the first movie within minutes, stuff like that. But you never saw too much, and even the jokes would only go so far and the language would go so far. But Deadpool threw all that stuff out the window. Deadpool, even in the comics, he's just a whole different guy. The way he interacts with all the rest of the characters, all that stuff. He's just totally different, far from family friendly. And the MCU even has some moments that not necessarily the most family friendly, but definitely not the most graphic either. So it was okay. Deadpool throws that out the window. Like, seeing kids in the Deadpool and Wolverine movie theater was very weird for me. So I'm like, why did you think toddlers at that? And I'm like, why did you think it was a good idea to bring these kids here? But hey, it is what it is. Make y'all choice. But you know what I'm saying? Like, the approach with Deadpool resonated with a specific audience, or resonated with fans of Marvel, as well as the MCU, in a way that the actual MCU could not, just because the approach was so left field. So with that being said, I'm personally worried that integrating Deadpool into the MCU will force the writers to tone down his behavior, his vulgar, his language, the way he, goes about his action scenes. Because how are you going to have, you know, Deadpool fighting next to some of the Avengers and, those different teams that are in the MCU if he ever interacts with them, which I'm sure he will. He's one of the key things is that he's super annoying to be around. How you gonna have that and they're kicking butt, but he's cutting people's balls off, beheading them. The fight between Wolverine and Deadpool, I think the first one, um, Wolverine shoved his claws up Deadpool's behind. You know what I mean? Like the real crazy stuff that had you like, ooh, oh, you know what I mean? At least for guys, because we know certain things felt very bad. It's like, imagine Deadpool doing all that, but then you have the rest of these MCU characters that have never done anything a fragment close to that. The most you might have seen is Captain America using the shield to chop off an alien enemy's arm, which you don't necessarily look all that crazy, especially because they look more robotic than anything. They're aliens, but they also look pretty robotic, so it just doesn't hit the same. It makes you wonder, would it lead to Deadpool not being as effective as it once was? Deadpool was the kind of IP that thrives on those things, in such a blatant fashion that even, again, Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark / Iron Man wasn't able to do. But to do that, it needed its own space. It needed to be separate from everybody else. So I wonder if Deadpool being part of the team will actually work out. When it comes to, like, without the constraints of fitting into a larger universe, the creators of Deadpool were able to enjoy a level of creativity and a level of creative freedom that allowed for bolder storytelling and character development. This freedom could be compromised within the structured narrative of the MCU, especially because they have a fixed point that they're trying to go to. At least now, with Doctor Doom now being the main big bad that they're trying to entertain for what seems to be the next 2 to 3 phases, now that Kang is officially out the window. Deadpool didn't seem to have like an actual point that he was trying to reach, but now he's gonna have to join a group of people that will, and he's definitely gonna take part in that big fight. For fans of Deadpool, they've come to expect a certain level of like outrageousness when it comes to his humor. Again, integrating Deadpool into the MCU might dilute some of these things, along with a broader audience, potentially alienating the core fan base, so they'll be disinterested or uninterested. But what's arguably contributed to the less than positive reception of the latest MCU installments is the level of PC or political correctness. While Tony Stark was the main MCU to kind of like counter this in a way, again, he's not, he doesn't hold a candle to Deadpool, but he was the main one to be like a little more graphic and less PC and all that stuff. That, and it was humorous, so it was kind of acceptable. I don't remember there being any type of like outrage at some of the jokes that Tony Stark would make in the movies and stuff like that. So I don't think it was that bad. I'm worried that there will be a level of like pacification where they try to please the hardcore Deadpool fans, to the best of their ability, because of how the first three movies started off. But now if he becomes part of the MCU, or he's not part of the MCU, but they have to like dial things down, then it's gonna be like, why does it seem so watered down, so soft, so not Deadpool, at least in comparison to the first three movies. And I think that's the type of thing that would alienate some of the more hardcore fans. Yeah, as far as potential storytelling when it comes to Deadpool joining the MCU, it does open up a new set of different storylines, collaborations, and possibilities for Deadpool as a character. Interactions with established characters like Spider-Man is a main one, Thor, Guardians of the Galaxy, could lead to new narratives that, well, Guardians of the Galaxy, I think as a whole, are supposed to be done. They did say that Star-Lord, Chris Pratt's character, is supposed to return, but that's it. As far as Guardians, they might as a whole be done. Some of the other MCU characters, it will be interesting to see how he interacts with them. Yeah, I'd be very interested to see primarily Spider-Man and Deadpool interact due to other iterations of them interacting as a team. For me, mainly the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, which personally I liked. Apparently a lot of people didn't like it. I liked it. I forget what the name of the other Spider-Man cartoon that came before it was. It got canceled so that Ultimate Spider-Man could be produced. Yeah, and a lot of people didn't like that. And I forget what it was called. It might have been Amazing Spider-Man, the cartoon. And personally, when I saw the art style, I was not worried about it. At some point, I backtracked to the Amazing Spider-Man cartoon, and that part, I think they kind of left on the cliffhanger when it came to him becoming Venom and his behavioral change and stuff like that. And I see why people liked it. I was disappointed myself when I finally gave it a chance. So I see that. But as far as the Ultimate Spider-Man interaction, kind of like team up between Deadpool, it would be interesting to see that type of interaction, but obviously more graphic for adult audiences, because that was for kids. So that's the main one that sticks out to me. Another angle to it is that Deadpool joining the MCU will of course add to the MCU fan base and make it larger than it already is, not including the people who obviously have lost interest because of the latest performance and quality of it. They may not have been as engaged. I know for me, I was not as engaged into the Deadpool solo movies at first. Deadpool and Wolverine was honestly the first one that I actually really liked. The first two, they just didn't hit for me at first. It wasn't until after I watched Deadpool and Wolverine I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go back and watch the first two. And I actually was cracking up because the humor was what was kind of weird for me. It was kind of hit or miss. It seemed like you had to have a very specific type of taste in humor to enjoy the Deadpool movies, and it just didn't work for me. But for whatever reason, after I saw Deadpool and Wolverine, I went back to the first two and I was actually enjoying them, to the point where, honestly, as much as I enjoyed Deadpool and Wolverine, I might enjoy Deadpool 1 the most. Maybe. I'll probably give it another watch or two, but we'll see about that. Yeah, man, I wasn't the biggest fan at first, until the last movie came out, and now I'm interested. I want to see where Deadpool goes. At this point, I think it's fair to say I love Deadpool. Maybe not as a character, but just the performance in the movie we've gotten so far, in the movies we've gotten. It didn't really need help when it came to its own franchise. But I do think, similar to the future of Doctor Doom and Spider-Man interactions as well, that has everybody just reeling right now, myself included. I'm really interested to see what that type of interaction would be like. Yeah, there's, I guess you can say, an appeal to to be discovered with the interactions between Deadpool and other Marvel characters, which will only grow in time. So that's one of the better things about it when it comes to interactions, team ups, and maybe any humor that comes across. It might open up some things that we don't realize yet. As far as potential challenges by bringing Deadpool into the MCU, the MCU's more family-friendly approach could clash with Deadpool's mature content. We've already covered this. Trying to find a balance that satisfies both sides without compromising like creative integrity and the essence of Deadpool as a character, that's going to be a pretty big challenge. That's going to be a tall order. Honestly, the more I talk about it, the more I question if it's even possible. There's a risk that Deadpool's character would be toned down just to fit into the MCU. The MCU is already packed with hella heroes. And that's just the heroes, like the villains, just hella characters. MCU's already packed. They still plan on introducing more. Whether or not all these characters are gonna play a role in the bigger Avengers movies, mainly in Secret Wars when it comes for the saga to the multiverse / mutant, because they say we're in the mutant saga, but they already kicked off the multiverse saga. And it seems like obviously with Secret Wars, those events are going to be predicated off of the multiverse saga. So it seems like we have a hybrid saga of the multiverse and mutant saga. I don't know. Maybe someone can clarify that for me. But yeah, it's packed. It's packed. Even when you look at some of the characters that are going to be part of Secret Wars already, that's been confirmed, and we're talking about that in its own right. But not only is that list already long, or even the speculated list is already long, boy, is it going to be expensive. But it's interesting because when you go back to the Infinity Saga, mainly with Endgame, I would say more than anything, even between Infinity War and Endgame, it didn't, in my opinion, feel like there was like a genuine shortage of time split between the different characters. They all had room to breathe. They all had meaningful action and or dialogue. They, and all of them, their presence all felt known, and from what I can tell, Secret Wars is going to be even bigger. We don't even know how big Doomsday is going to be, but Secret Wars is bound to be only bigger if it's going to follow anything related to the comic books that is bound to follow, which I'm pretty sure they're going to follow the 2015 iteration of Secret Wars, since it's more popular than the 1984 iteration. And that list is going to be massive. If it's going to be even bigger than Infinity War plus Endgame, more so Endgame, I'm really curious. I'm talking about like the characters to truly pay attention to, not ones that kind of are just there. Like characters that actually may be there to do something to progress the story and the narrative. I don't know how Deadpool's gonna fit. He's already drastically different in behavior and everything and in tone. How's he gonna fit when it comes to that final fight and that final clash to wrap up the saga? That's what's really gonna be interesting to me. But I want to know your guys' opinion, your guys' thoughts. Do you think bringing Deadpool into the MCU was a good idea? The way I see it, it's a double-edged sword. While there are exciting opportunities for new stories, collaborations that we may or may not be expecting, maybe a potential tone change for the MCU, who knows? Increased visibility for the character, of course. There are significant risks when it comes to undermining Deadpool as a character, the MCU just as an overall, I guess you can say, larger franchise. How's he gonna, it's gonna be weird when it comes to trying to find that balance to not antagonize Deadpool's core fan base and the larger MCU's core fan base. And then even then you have the different fan bases split between the different characters themselves. So, that's a lot of tap dancing these guys are gonna have to do. But yeah, only time will tell where this will go when it comes to his addition to the larger MCU. Overall, I'm happy about it. I'm curious to see where it goes, but it's like, this is a very different character. Wolverine makes sense. Because they can easily kind of clean up the vocab if they want to do that. As long as he's like violent, beating people up, has a short, somewhat temper, I guess. All that stuff, we'll be okay. He doesn't need to swear every other word, or do a bunch of graphic stuff. It suits him, but he doesn't have to. Hugh Jackman was able to do that before and do it well before this, so he can go back to it if that's what they choose to do. Deadpool? I don't know. But I'll go and leave that here, guys. Again, go ahead and throw me your feedback and opinions in the comment section below. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Later.